Yes, if Rome was the starter, surely Paris is the main course. Iran's president in the French capital on his first tour of Europe since the official start of sanctions relief less than 2 weeks ago. And yes, we are talking about big deals, plural, from the purchase of Airbus planes to a joint venture with car maker Peugeot and much, much more. The scramble is on, and you could say it works both ways. Hassan Rouhani needs to deliver fast as the struggle between moderates and hardliners plays out, most notably in next month's Guardian Council election. That's the body that could hypothetically pick the next supreme leader of Iran. But of course, Rouhani in the French capital is a story unto itself. There's a lot of water under the bridges of Paris between Iran and the nation an exiled Ayatollah Khomeini once called home. We'll see why France drove a harder bargain than most during nuclear talks and why it's now open for business with Tehran. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Rouhani in Paris. With us to talk about it, Fariba Hachtrudi, her new novel, The Man Who Snapped His Fingers. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We want to thank as well Nigel Coulthard, chair of the Paris-based think tank, the Iran Economic Circle. Is that how you translate it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. You yourself worked in Iran for years.
Yes, I was actually there before and during the revolution as a youngster. And I returned in 2003 and headed up the Alstom Group.
The French engineering firm.
For 7 years. So under Khatami and Ahmadinejad.
Also with us, a man who knows a thing or two about Iran, Thierry Coville of the French Research Center for International Strategic Studies, IRIS. Thank you for joining us again here in the debate. Okay. And we want to thank as well Abbas Aslani for joining us again. He is in Tehran. He is General Director at the Foreign Desk for the Tasnim News Agency. How are you?
Fine. Thank you for having me.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. 17 billion euros worth of deals signed in Italy. Now it's on to France for a first official visit there by an Iranian president since 1999. Delano de Souza has more.
International sanctions have been lifted and Iran's ready to do business, first with Italy and now with France. On the first official trip to Europe by an Iranian president in almost 2 decades, Hassan Rouhani is assuring potential business partners that working with Iran makes sense, and not just economically.
I would like to stress the fact that if we want to combat extremism and violence in the world, one way to do it is to create development and to create jobs.
Before sanctions really started to bite, France was one of Tehran's main European business partners. In 2004, France held a 7% market share of the Iranian economy. A decade later, that had plummeted to just 1%. Both countries are now hoping to reverse the trend. Rouhani is meeting with around 20 business leaders, including the representatives from Total and Airbus, with Iran expected to order 114 aircraft from the company. The French auto industry too hopes to maximize on new Iranian opportunities, but this Franco-Iranian rapprochement isn't without difficulty. The two sides so far haven't seen eye to eye regarding the conflict in Syria, but they will now need to find common ground in fighting the Islamic State group. Meanwhile, analysts predict French exports to Iran alone could bring in 1.3 billion euros over the next 2 years.
All right, let's go around the room. Let me begin with you, Thierry Coville, just to explain it to us here, because for people going in cold, they're a little confused. On the one hand, the French, you'll recall, driving that hard bargain. At one point, they even called for a suspension of those nuclear talks that were taking place in Vienna and Switzerland. And then as soon as the deal was paraphrased, hadn't even yet been finalized, we saw those French business leaders rush to Tehran.
Yes, I mean, but as your report just said, Iran was the biggest market of French companies in the Middle East, middle of the year 2000. So French companies were there, Alstom were there, Renault was there, Peugeot was there. Peugeot was selling 450,000 cars a year. It was the biggest market of Peugeot outside Europe. Total was there, so, they had to, they did not want to leave the Iranian market. That was, the French official policy. So they had to leave.
So why were the French so hawkish?
I mean, maybe that's outside my expertise. Maybe it has a lot to do with, I think, French policy. I think what I know, there is a neoconservative spirit, unfortunately, in French foreign ministry. They see Iran as the enemy. I mean, it sometimes when they speak, you think that you are talking about the Iranian revolutionary Iran just after the 80s. I think that they didn't see what happened in Iran for the last 35 years. So, and I think sometimes it's even, let me tell you, ridiculous. The way they talk about Saudi Arabia, looking at what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen too, and the way they talk about Iran, sometimes it's not credible. So, anyway, I think French companies are willing to come back to Iran. And, the talk that you could hear in France, they are going to make us pay for hard stance, in terms of diplomacy. I heard the opposite in Iran. They enjoy working with French companies. French companies have very good image in Iran. And they just want to make, competition and to have the best price, the best technology. And they're very keen in starting new partnership with French companies. So it's not a paradox. I think it's logical.
Abbas Aslani, do you just put it aside? You just ignore it? The fact that, for instance, France's president was the first European leader ever to attend last year a summit of GCC nations led by Saudi Arabia, that they're doing a lot of business with the Saudis?
Can you repeat the question, because I couldn't hear it completely?
What I was asking was, when you're in Iran, is it easy to ignore that France is doing a lot of business and has close ties with Saudi Arabia?
France, as a European country, has ties with some countries in the region, as you mentioned, with the Saudi Arabia, and they have their interest in dealing and interacting with those countries. I don't think that the France's interaction and engagement with the countries like Saudi Arabia in the region can cause any problem for Iran. They have their own right, they have their own interests to deal with the countries in the region. And as the Iranian side have been saying recently, as Iranian president said that they are open for the engagement even with the Saudi Arabia. However, there have been tensions between the countries, between Tehran and Riyadh. Iran's Speaker of Parliament also said that Iran is ready to negotiate over the issues and doesn't want any damage for the Saudi Arabia. So let's be back to the question. I think France has the right to engage with other countries in the region, no problem. What the issue is that what comes to Iran and France bilateral relations and the issues they need to be worked out, they need to focus on those areas, because the relations between Iran and France in the past, in the history, has had ups and downs. When you look at the past time, when you look the revolution days, before the revolutions days, Iranian had a good memory of France, because the founder of the Islamic Revolution was in France. But after this event, there was another dark thing which happened, and that was the France supported Saddam Hussein when he was attacking Iran. There was the down in the past of Iran and France relations. But we have had other, in the course of time later.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride. We're going to, Abbas Aslani, we're going to get back to those ups and downs that you're describing. I first want to ask the rest of our panel about, again, and what Thierry Covid just said, that Iranians, they business is one thing and politics is another. Yeah, is that really true, though?
I think you really must realize that Iranians are very, very pragmatic. And the French have to be pragmatic as well. So there was a political position. It's not quite true. The French delegation did not go straight away. It went at the end of September. And there was a clear separation of the political visit from Fabius and the commercial visit later, 2 months later. So I don't quite share your analysis of that. But above all, Iranians are very pragmatic. They have a window of opportunity now, and as Thierry was saying, Iran is not new for France. When I was resident in France, France was doing in excess of $4 billion. That fell down to a tenth of the value, to 400 million. So,
And are the French car makers going to get their market share back, for instance?
I imagine they hope so. What has happened during that period is that the Chinese have taken a foothold, but I think the Iranians are a little, how can I say, a little troubled by Chinese approaches and Chinese technology, and they really want to get hold of the best technology.
And what's the word when you've been speaking to French business leaders? I'm reading here what a senior trading executive said about doing business in Iran after the beginning of the lifting of sanctions. It says it's very difficult despite the sanctions removal. Dollar clearing is an issue. Banks' letters of credit is an issue. Ship insurance is an issue. Loads of people are still very cautious.
Yeah, and they will be. But doing business in Iran has never been straightforward. But there are certain obstacles that need to be solved. COFAS has to get up and running. Banks have to set up credit letters. I think the large corporations in France have had a cold shower after the BNP fiasco and the $9 billion fine that they had to pay. But medium-sized to the States, yes.
Yeah.
So there is prudence, and the major companies in France are looking for clear guidelines from OFAC, and I think that is going to be key to returning business.
Farid Bahashturi, how open for business is Iran?
I'm not very good at business, but I can tell you that, in fact, Iran is opening up. I've been just a month ago there, and there is real changes. But now, also, as you said...
What kind of real changes?
First of all, the atmosphere is not what I've seen in 2009 as a woman, as a person coming from outside, as a farmer, very opponent, which I'm still opponent in some way about the human rights inside Iran. But I didn't had any problems, any kind of problems, which I was really puzzled by that. About business as well, I think that Iran needs that, and Europe needs that as well. I want just to say something to add about what it has been said already about France and Iran. It's not just problem of Iran. Thierry Coville had said, in fact, that sometimes the action and reaction of France was quite stupid towards Iran. And I think there were some very, very much critic inside France against this shifted of policy to get through Saudi Arabia, just like all of a sudden, like it was the only way to get business and forget totally about Iran, which is geopolitically, economically, and it's a country you cannot turn over. They were a real, that I know about, and in social parties especially, and in public opinion. Public opinion are not very happy about seeing Hollande going to Saudi Arabia and not dealing. I mean, deal, it's something, as said this gentleman, I mean, business is business. But still, why not have a kind of balance between the two major, let's say, I won't say enemies, but at least the two major, exactly. That is some, and coming back to Iran, and I will finish with this, population and civil society makes the difference, and the pragmatism of Rouhani and his government understand that very well. Iran cannot go on like this forever with the hope or goals of the extreme, which still they exist and they are there.
And that's a point we're going to pick up on in a bit. But let's again talk about this bilateral relationship. Thierry Coville, let's a little bit about first of all about the visit itself that's taking place. Hassan Rouhani is going to be traveling to UNESCO. He's going to be sitting down with François Hollande. There won't be blushes, by the way, over covered statues like they were in Rome, where someone decided to hide Roman-era nudes. The Iranian delegation insists they made no special request on that score, but it's causing a bit of a stir across the Alps. No nudes, no wine at the state dinner in Rome, and you won't see wine at the state dinner in Paris because, well, there is no state dinner. This is France. Heresy in this country is a banquet without a fine bottle. Are you glad there's no state dinner, Thierry Coville?
Honestly, I think there was all of this talk in the previous visit as, should we put wine on the table?
Then there was talk of a breakfast.
Honestly, it's so stupid. I mean, looking at what was said, Iran is such a strategic country, a key country for a lot of crises, all civilization. I mean, who cares, honestly?
I'll argue the point. It's the symbols of the republic.
There is no law. Honestly, talk to diplomats. There is no law which impose wine on the table.
There's no law, but it's a good photo op for two nations to be.
I mean, I think a lot of diplomats from a lot of head of governments from Middle East or Muslim countries come to Paris and have dinner, and there is no issue of wine or alcohol. So I think it's I think as a respect of our host, I mean, honestly, there won't be any dinner. So the issue of having wine at the table, I think France and Iran have very old relations. They know each other. We had ups and downs. I think the big issue now, is to start, I hope, start new relations. I think.
And Hassan Rouhani himself was here in exile at one point, had come in the old days.
Yes, but relations didn't start with the Islamic revolution. You have very old relations. What is interesting, coming back to your first question, before France was seen in Iran as, let's say, a country of culture. The Iranian elite was speaking French. There are very old scientific, cultural links between France and Iran. What is interesting that, I met some Iranian delegations in the 90s. They didn't know French technology, French companies. They discovered French companies in the 90s, companies like Renault, Total, Peugeot. And what is interesting that they are very willing to work with French companies. So let's say, let's to be pragmatic, we have a market where people are willing to work with us. There is no problem of payment with Iran. Let's say in terms of political stability, I think we can talk. There are issues in Iran, but in terms of political stability compared to the rest of the region, it's stable. So I think French companies are very strong interest to go there, and I understand the issue of cultural issue, and they have also other issues. I think in terms of diplomacy, politics. The French policy in Syria, I think, has been a catastrophe. There is a fight against the Islamic State. Iran is there. They have their objectives. They have not the same objectives as us, But, why don't we start? My issue, to make it simple, we should take Iran as a, between comma, normal country. We should have diplomatic relations with them. We don't need to agree on everything, but we should talk to Iran.
All right, why it's not exactly normal, we'll be explaining that to our viewers and asking our panel. When we come back, you're watching the France 24 debate.